I'm very impressed by what you're doing, and since the EU is so much struggling with the refugee crisis, like, did you have any chance of providing some tips to the EU? Like, we really need to learn from this. Did you have the chance already to share it?
Thank you. I mentioned in my presentation that we recently had the Solidarity Summit in Kampala, 22nd and 23rd June, to which we invited a number of countries, and they came. So we shared our experiences. So I hope they picked something from. And I told you, even the German federal minister was there on 9th August, and he commended. He even went to visit the camps to see for himself, because he was saying, how can us, a rich European nation, fail to do this, and yet you, a poor country, are doing it? But of course, some conditions are different. These people are just pouring at the gate, but it's a different situation, but it can be discussed later. But we have shared our experiences with them.
So what is the biggest thing to learn for the EU?
From me, is give someone a chance. When someone needs to stay alive, give him a chance. It doesn't matter, because the thing is, in Europe, you think someone has to have a flat, has to stay with a TV, with the internet. No, when someone is running, first take him and absorb him first, then the other things can come in place later. Yeah.
I think what's particularly interesting is how at a time where lots of countries are closing their borders, when resources and national opinion starts to be challenged, Uganda is an example of continuing, due to this history and this tradition of welcoming large numbers of people. We're going to take one more question before moving on to our addressing our challenge.
Yes.
That's you with the
Can
microphone.
I? Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a question, but going back to the point about the hexagon. You know, it was for you, but for Mr. Norman too, if you want to join the question. Okay, it could be that I look a little bit unpolite, but I don't think it could be applied to the African case, because after all, we neglect lots of diversified realities that are hosted in Africa. So we don't talk about Hutu, Tutsi, you know, all the minorities that still survive in Africa, and they are part of the environment of Africa. So there's not just cities like Nairobi, they are more developed than a sort of European countries, for instance. But there are a lot of minorities that are still alive, and we can apply this kind of model, because after all, it was created by Simon Arnold, if I don't go wrong, and is an English political advisor. So what about African thinkers? What do they think about the way? That's not just a line of development. There are lots of lines of development, and I think that Africa has to find by itself its way to move forward, instead of looking at other models or pattern of behavior. This is what I mean. So, and this is where I really believe when we talk about conducting a dialogue with Western partners. So if you don't find yourself by yourself, how can you request that other one feel respect toward you? This is what I mean.
Yeah, actually, that's what we are suggesting, that traditional nation branding kind of is incomplete, especially in cases like you just mentioned in Africa. And that's part of the Good Country Guide, is to get us to rethink nation branding. And this particular example is an example of how actually maybe we could be branding ourselves around these kind of ideas, and not simply on vague references to culture and heritage for the purpose of attracting narrow-minded economic objectives. I'd like to actually move on to one of the challenges faced by Uganda and their refugee policies at the moment. Now, obviously, the policies have come under great strain due to the sheer numbers of people that are coming. And one challenge is the area of education, as we mentioned. I think to quote a statistic from the United Nations, women and children comprise of 85% of Uganda's total refugee policy, and according to the UNICEF, children make up 62% of the 1.8 million refugees since the conflict erupted in 2013. So that's part of the reason we've invited Dr. Renata Suter here today. She's from an organization called Kiron. I'd like you to explain to everyone a little bit more about Kiron. And I'd like you all to think about perhaps some of these models that Kiron use and how they could potentially be applied to this situation. And perhaps we could then have a response from Mr. Mukhooli in perhaps how this could be related to the Ugandan case.
So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and also for the interesting introduction from you before. So yeah, Kiron is a net tech organization, a non-profit organization, and it was founded 2 years ago, a little bit before the peak of the so-called refugee crisis in Germany. And our aim is to provide access to higher education for refugees worldwide. So we focus on higher education, on bachelor degrees, but of course our learnings, we have a lot of research and development projects also with the German government. They're of course applicable to other stages of the educational path of children and youth. So what we use is, because of course there are a lot of barriers that refugees face. It's not only the legal barriers like missing documents, it's also things like language barriers, it's capacity barriers, like colleges don't have the capacity to take on all these people, and then of course also the costs. So what we provide is free education, so our platform is accessible free of charge. It's in English because that's the language that most people worldwide speak, and the MOOCs that we use. So we use massive open online courses to provide higher education that are produced by external partners. They are produced mostly in English. So we try with our model to overcome some of these barriers that refugees face. They can start studying online with us independently of their status, independently of where they are. They don't have to wait and until they can go to a normal university in their new host country. They can start immediately studying with us in one of our study tracks, and then we help them to transfer to a local university once they have all the documents they require. And we help them, and this is something very important as well. We, of course, studying online is very hard. It requires a lot of self-discipline. I don't know who of you have ever done a MOOC, one of these massive open online courses online, and those of you who've started, who completed them. So it's really, it takes a lot of discipline to do that. So we provide them with a lot of support services. With we use a blended learning model, and this is very important. I know also from colleagues using kind of these models in Africa. The blended learning means that you have offline and online components of your education, and we use self-paced MOOCs where they learn themselves online, but then also live tutorials. We have study groups online. We have online study mentoring. We have buddy programs. So we support our students a lot in their studies, also to integrate into their new host community. And I think this is also important. The earlier the age, so the younger the students that you have, the more support, the more offline support, the more guidance the students need. So this was one of the learnings that we had in these 2 years that we exist now, that our students need a lot of guidance in their curriculum, in their studies, but also through direct contact with us and with other students.
So obviously there's a lot of parallels there that could be picked up and used. For example, the digital teaching, the guest teaching. Is that something that has or is being looked into as an option, or is it something that could be applied and invested in the kind of digital infrastructure and the infrastructure in Uganda to start providing kind of effective solutions to this problem in terms of finance and in terms of logistics as well?
Thank you. As you mentioned earlier, you said 80% or over 80% of the people who come to our refugees are women and children. So most of the education requirements are for the young generation, primary school going and some of the secondary school going. In Uganda, we have what we call universal primary education, UPE, and universal secondary education, which is free. But what she has said, what Kiron does is commendable, and I wish it's something that could be taken on. But when you think of the setting we have back in the refugee camps, first of all, internet itself, you may find there is no computer, or if there is a computer, it's only for the registration in the center of the office of the refugee commissioner. So I don't think this can be applied on our type of refugee because of the settings and the logistics. It's not possible. But it would be a welcome thing if with the time and funding, if we had because some of the people are qualified, they would be able to do, if someone had finished secondary school, he would be able to continue with his university. And he ran away, and but the way she has explained, someone would, even without documentations at that time, can start, can enroll in for a course. So but for the time being, and the setting of our refugee settlements, I think it's something which is yet to come, but not now.
Yeah, we know about these problems because we have students in refugee camps, not only in Uganda, in other countries in Africa as well, and they, of course, tell us about the not so great situation with internet access and computers. But we have other partner institutions, partner organizations that work in refugee camps in Africa, and what they provide, they work a lot with other NGOs that provide then the infrastructure, and they provide the educational model. So they provide the learning platform. So of course, if you want to enter such an area, you need to provide the infrastructure, and you need to work with partners, with NGOs that provide this infrastructure, because it's not yet there that everybody has their mobile phone with an internet flat or anything or something like that. So we have focus countries, and in each focus country we deal with a lot of other problems, legal problems, of course, other requirements of universities, but then also other infrastructure problems. In Germany, it's quite good, I would say. We are also in Jordan. There, it's a different thing. And then in Africa, of course, we have a lot of students that tell us that who ask us where to study, whether we can guide them where they can find access. And I think there it's very important to work with NGOs that provide this access.
I mean, of course, you have a lot of priorities right now, but it seems to me that this is an area of investment from the Ugandan government's perspective that would be quite worthwhile in investing in the long term. So, I mean, specifically, are there any kind of plans to invest in this area of infrastructure within the 2016 to 2020 National Development Plan that you mentioned?
Yes, we have plans. Right now, in the past few years, we have been laying the fiber optic cable to improve internet connection, because in the past it was slow and expensive because of the volumes. But if you moved around Kampala or some other cities, you're going to find that there's a lot of digging. People are laying, you'll wonder what's wrong with it. Why are they uprooting all their roads? But we are laying fiber optic cables, and we hope with time this will improve internet connectivity. But as she said, government also needs to regulate some of the NGOs and agencies that come to help. Because sometimes there's duplication of work, yet if you give direction, they would maybe invest that money or use that money in such an area. not everyone should be bringing tents, everyone bringing food. We should think of diversifying or guiding them with what to do when they come to assist us.
And Renata, can you tell us a little bit more about the content of the courses and the online courses? That how do you tailor that for the students, or how do you come up with that? You mentioned these massive online courses. How do you come up with the content that's suitable for the educational and the educational needs of that particular group of people?
So we don't produce that ourselves. We build on what our partners, such as Coursera or edX, that you might know, produce. So these are courses that are produced by the MIT, by Harvard, by RWTH Aachen in Germany, and other great universities. So what the benefit of that is that that we are able to provide high-class education for people worldwide. So it's not anymore that you need access to a local university, to a good one, to get good education, but you get that wherever you are through these MOOCs. So what we have is we have curriculum coordinators in our team. So they build a curriculum in the specific field. We have 5 study tracks, such as computer science or business and economics. So we have study tracks, bachelor's programs that are that are built on the Bologna tools. So our study tracks follow the Bologna tools, so the higher education tools used in Europe. But of course, when we go to Jordan, we have to discuss with them again what their requirements are at their university. So this is like the standard in Europe, but in every country where you have partner universities, this is a new challenge then. But I think what the big advantage of MOOCs is that you really have access, or you provide access to high-class education for a large amount of people that you couldn't provide otherwise. And then you can, of course, provide them with offline support, with blended learning, with tutoring, complementing these courses. So that's what we do as well. That's what we do ourselves. Then we have a lot of volunteers working at universities, giving seminars, online seminars for our students online, and doing that for free for our students. And we get like that we can complement these high-class MOOCs with high-class tutorials.
So just quickly, finally, I mean, so that seems like a really kind of sensible, cost-effective way of accessing such a large number of people with high-quality information quite quickly. So, I mean, off the top of my head, that could be something that governments could also take charge in and administer to as a cost-effective solution to such a problem. We're running out of time, so I would like to open the floor just to a couple more questions before we finish, if anyone has any on this topic. Yes? Come and bring you the microphone.
Hi, I have a question for both. Renata, how do you integrate, or after people have skills, do you assist them with employment? Because I think mostly it's economic refugees that are accessed here in Berlin, politically as well. But how do you access them to jobs and unemployment and employment? And then for the councillor from Uganda, I just wanted to find out how do you actually assist the local communities when there's pressure for basic services? How do you avoid conflict between the local communities, the local population, and the refugee population, especially in terms of the long-term refugee placements?
So maybe we have to say we don't help them with accessing jobs. We empower them through education, and then in the best case they are at the same level of an education after their bachelor's as every other student in this host community as well. So we empower them through a degree, through a accredited degree at a university, and then they will find their jobs as every other student getting a degree from that university as well. We have a lot of companies that are interested in our students, especially in our computer science students, for instance, or also business and economic students. There is a lot of interest coming, especially in Germany, from companies to have people as interns, for instance. So the interest is there for these highly qualified students, but our focus, we are a very young organization. We have to have a focus now. We cannot do degree programs and higher education and job market integration. So we focus on higher education, but we work with partners who do other things.
The question of the refugees coexisting with the host communities is very sensitive. If you don't handle it well as government, it can explode. So once these people have been settled in an area, you as government make sure, that's why, because that's the policies I mentioned from the Office of the Prime Minister, are geared at making sure that these two communities live side by side. These go out, they're allowed to go out and offer their labor. So I can go and work on your farm, cheap, because it's cheap labor. We are there free. I'm idle. What to do? There's labor, and also there's market for vice versa for the products. And then the pressure usually is on schools and health facilities and the watering points, because if some of the refugees come with their cows, so if someone goes to graze his cow and then goes to the watering point, they have come with. You find many cows are meeting at one river point, and it brings friction. So it is the local leaders to find a way of putting these people, guiding them so that they live side by side without friction. One thing you should know is some of the communities I'm talking of are not, because let me explain this. When during the Scramble for Africa, from the Berlin Conference in 1884, when the superpowers then sat down and drew lines on the continent and made maps for us. Some of the communities are same tribe. So you find, I come from Eastern Uganda, but on the other Western Kenya, they are my brothers and sisters, same language. So people from Northern Uganda have relatives in Sudan, speak the same language. In the area near Rwanda and Congo and Western Uganda, some of the languages are there. So when this pour to you, you find that there is that ease of language. So we don't say, forget about the Berlin Conference that drew the maps. These are your cousins, these are your relatives. They have the same traditions, the same. That's why some of them move with their cows, because like the tribes that are nomadic, they keep moving with their cows wherever they go. They will not, whatever, over his dead body, he has to go with his cow. But, so as government, it's upon you to make sure, can you provide more schools or classrooms, or can you educate these people in the camp, make their own schools, and then health facilities, make sure there's more treatment, there are more doctors or more, and some of the agencies and the NGOs facilitate and help with that. So that is the thing. The policies are to make sure, to ease, to lubricate, make sure there is no friction. And the other issue, we talked of the 9 host districts. They are helping them with the infrastructure, the roads, the wells for the water, and more boreholes, so that there's less pressure on the few boreholes or river points. Yeah.
Do we have time for any more questions, or?
I think we're just running out of schedule.
Okay.
We do apologize,
but
hopefully throughout the lunch break, around an hour and a half, you'll have time to network a bit. I do apologize for the moderator.
No problem.
Had to excuse itself.
No problem.
But it was a real honor to have you all here, and hopefully you'll be able to carry on the questions now at our lunch break.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank our guests today. Thank you very much.